of absorption and stimulated emission, spontaneous emission, and photoelectric effect. But I'll skip photoelectric effect for today. So today we will just limit to these first two, etc. So review we had already done. Let me go through it once again, just because it's sort of important. So we discussed absorption and stimulated emission. So I start from a hydrogen atom like system, collection of atoms. Hamiltonian I have written for a single atom, and the light matter interaction we know minus IH del goes to minus IH del plus EA, and if I do that expansion, etc., I'll get this term as time dependent H in, which I need to solve by using time dependent perturbation theory. And for the first part, H naught, I already know the solutions, pi k's, etc. And the full solution I write in terms of these. And using time dependent perturbation theory, which we did in one of these classes, first class or second class, we can write this solution for the arbitrary coefficients, time evolution in terms of all other coefficients, etc. And the way the perturbation theory goes is I take ground state. I start from some assumption that initially the system was in that state. And on the right hand side, I substitute that. And the left hand side, I'll be left with first order perturbation plus the ground state properties. And that I will call the first order perturbation theory, which is this equation here, basically. Right. So we did this for this exercise. And then we assume that A has a form of, envelope of some frequencies, etc., where the envelope characteristics is given by this A0 omega, and I end up with this equation basically. And I just discussed that no, the first part will give you absorption. Okay, so there should be a plus sign here. The second part, and the second part will give you this stimulated emission. Okay. And of course, we solved this in detail. So the time dependence we will solve again today as an exercise. And we showed that this CB, so the probability of transition, I can calculate with as a function of time, and broadly for large frequencies, etc. It is given by this expression. So it linearly increases with time. So then it doesn't make sense to talk about the probability. We'll talk about the transition rate. So the rate change of the probability, let's say. Okay. And that we divide this by time. So we take the derivative of this with respect to time, I get the transition probability. Okay. And given the transition probability, I can define the absorption cross section, which is rate of energy absorption per unit intensity of the incident radiation, let's say. And similarly, I follow the same approach by using the second part of the term. I can calculate the stimulated emission. Okay. And it gives me exactly the same expression in the sense of detailed balance principle, which we just talked about, etc. In fact, their absorption coefficients are also identical. So we just follow from this WAB being equal to WTA. No? So this is the picture to keep in mind of what we have done till now. So I had a hydrogen-like system which have A, B, C, D, etc. states. A was the lower energy, B was the higher energy state. I shown light on it, etc. I had a jump from A level to B level. So this is called absorption. And then I had a downward jump from B level to A level. So this is called stimulated emission. And now in this, there's an even more fantastic process that I will not shine light on it. Okay. And still I'll get a photon out of a collection of atoms. Okay. So without shining any light, in presence of zero radiation, I can have a photon which will come out of the system. And that is called this spontaneous emission, which we are going to discuss next. Okay. So very remarkable phenomena. So if I have a set of atoms, let's say in a box, in let's say also in equilibrium or in the ground state. So equilibrium, I'll just mean, there's no light there. And okay. And in this collection of atoms, which is not interacting with light because there were no photons, there can be a emission of a single photon process. And this single photon process is called this spontaneous emission. So spontaneous in a sense, it happens on its own. It is not stimulated by radiation. Okay. Okay. And that's a very remarkable quantum phenomena. There's no classical explanation for this, except for some phenomenological theory, let's say. Okay. And this is quantum nature of light at display in optics experiments. Okay. Maybe the first evidence of quantum nature of light, okay? Along with, let's say, photoelectric effect and things like that. Okay. Okay. So the major point here is that the spontaneous emission, the phenomena, was known much before we had a working theory for this. So what I call working theory is the way we understand this best currently, which is in terms of quantum electrodynamics, uh, which was basically Feynman's thesis and Nobel Prize, etc. Okay. And before this quantum electrodynamics theory, which was like 1930s or late 1920s and early 1930s, Feynman's thesis and Nobel Prize, we only had a phenomenological theory for this understanding quantum electrodynamics, which was in terms of Einstein's theory of absorption, emission, etc. And his theory had basically three different coefficients, which were phenomenologically introduced. So he had a coefficient of absorption, he had a coefficient for stimulated emission, and he had a coefficient for spontaneous emission. And of course, he'd already deduced in his, even in a phenomenological way, that the coefficient of absorption and the coefficient of stimulated emission have to be equal, which we just discussed in a sense of principle of detailed balance. So these were sort of already known experimentally, and also there in terms of in Einstein's theory of this phenomenological theory of these three kinds of emission, absorption, etc. Okay. So here is a very important point. Okay. Uh, so let's say I have some phenomena today for which I do not have a complicated or very accurate theory which produces corrections which are to 10 to the power minus 12 and so on. Okay, so that's the beauty of QAD. So it can uh, calculate corrections to optical properties, etc., to a remarkable degree of accuracy, and that has been tested experimentally. So that's the beauty of quantum electrodynamics. That's how we know that quantum electrodynamics is the theory that to whatever order we can do calculation and to whatever order we can do experiments, there's the absolute match. Okay, absolute match. Till now, we do not have, let's say, an experiment which violates quantum theory of quantum electrodynamic theory actually, and that's how we know that this is the theory within our current limitations of experimentation. Okay, but even when we did not have that theory, we had a phenomenological theory, which is this Einstein's theory, etc. And the phenomenological theory was sufficient to explain a lot of experiments, right? Of course, we could not calculate these coefficients of absorption and stimulated emission from theory, from first principles, etc., let's say, but I could use them as fitting parameters, which I get out of experiments. And once I have got it for, let's say, potassium atom or rubidium atoms or something, etc., then I can use this Einstein's theory, etc., which is a phenomenological theory, to even make more predictions, understand if I do this, what will happen, and so on. So that is, I wanted to highlight this because physics you should think of as sort of modeling. So even though I may not have a very accurate theory, I can still have a very good phenomenological theory which works wonders. Okay, and this is an example. So Einstein's theory with these three coefficients is an example of this. Okay? So we'll do this in one of the later classes, etc. But I just wanted to highlight this point. Okay, at least theoretical physics one can think of as modeling, and phenomenological theories can be very, very good models, right? Which will not appeal to us, maybe for those of us who seek beauty, but they can still be very, very useful. They are very, very appreciated by experimentalists. And a person like Einstein worked with phenomenological theories. So even the best of our minds develop phenomenological theories. So I work in condensed matter theory, and condensed matter, we are dealing with 10 to the power 23 electrons, 10 to the power 23 atoms, right? So there are a lot of phenomena which happens when all of these come together, etc. No, and there is no way I can start from Schrodinger equation and solve 10 to the power 23 coupled Schrodinger equations together. There's absolutely no way. Nobody in the world can do that, actually. Okay, nobody in the I would even go on to say universe can do that, etc. Okay. So then, of course, you have to rely on, you have to build from microscopic to macroscopic theories, and then work with those macroscopic theories, right? So an example. So let's say electromagnetic theory of light, right? So we can work with, charge distributions, current distributions. In materials, what will happen with light, how will it reflect, how will it bend, how will its frequency change, and all the other things we experimentally measure, we can explain with, classical theory of light, etc. Right? Which treats matter as a continuum. It doesn't treat matter as atoms, for example. It doesn't include, atom-like interaction in this particular form that we just did, right? But it is still a very successful theory, and I may call it a phenomenological theory because it is a macroscopic theory, which builds from microscopic quantum electrodynamics. But I do not need quantum electrodynamics to solve for everything. In fact, if I take quantum electrodynamics, I may not be able to solve this problem of light bending, Snell's law, derivation, and so on, etc. at all, okay, or with great difficulty. Okay, just like I cannot take Schrodinger equation and apply it to a system of solids, etc., with great accuracy. So I have to build some approximations on top of that. So I take microscopic theories, and I can build macroscopic theories on top of that. That gives me a better description of the world, or more relatable, more intuitive description of the world, which may be more useful. And most of the time, if you look at historical development of science, etc., most of these macroscopic or phenomenological theories came before the microscopic theories, of course. No? This will happen because we do experiments with what we see in the world, what is readily available. That defines our limit, etc. And we have been able to push our limits only with the advent of a lot of effort and scientific knowledge. And most of our state-of-the-art experimental efforts would be in the last 200-300 years, basically. Okay, because before that, our state-of-the-art was laws of.
Yeah, he's back. Sir, we can't hear you. Sir, you are mute.
Yeah. I think we got disconnected, right?
Yeah.
From my end, or I got disconnected. Let's see. Okay. So let's come back. No issues. Okay. Okay. So that was a good reminder that I was just babbling maybe about microscopic and phenomenological theories, right? Okay. So let's come back and go on to do this stimulated emission, etc. Okay. Yeah. So the major point I made here was that stimulated emission, I can think from a semi-classical description, but spontaneous emission I cannot think from a semi-classical framework, and I have to go to quantum electrodynamics. I think that's the major thing I was trying to say. Okay. And another thing I was trying to say, that even before we had a theory, QED theory of spontaneous emission, we had roughly a working theory, which was Einstein's theory, etc. And even before Einstein's theory, we must have a lot of other phenomenological models with which people used to compare their experimental results with, and things like that, etc. Okay. Okay. So here now I'm going to say a few things without explicitly proving them, but trust my word, and we may come back to this, or you may do this in some other course actually. Okay. So we are going to use quantum electrodynamics for understanding spontaneous emission. So in quantum electrodynamics, what will happen is we will treat this vector potential, which was classical field, we will make it into a quantum field, let's say. And these quantum fields will also have uh, creation operators and destruction operators, etc. But let's not go there. We will come back to that. So I'll discuss some quantum aspects of light in this course for sure later. But for now, we can think that in QED, the vector potential, which describes the absorption of a linearly polarized photon, let's say, the A vector potential is given by this expression, okay, which is this polarization of light times 2 times n omega. N omega is the number of photons, h bar, divided by v. V is the volume in which we are doing the experiment, let's say. Epsilon 0 omega, the frequency of the absorbed photon, and this half factor times this basically. Okay. And using quantum electrodynamics, we have a different format for calculation, etc. But essentially, it boils down to, again, first order perturbation theory. In QED, I can calculate these transition rates, which will look very similar to what we already had, except for this delta function, etc., which signifies energy conservation, that I can only have absorption when omega matches omega BA, etc. Okay, and this was for a single photon, etc., which had a precise energy of omega. But if I again take that, I had more than one photon, etc., with the envelope, and I integrate this equation over a range of frequencies, we will get identically the same result that we derived in the last class. So the semi-classical result, absolutely same result actually. Okay, for absorption. Okay, which is in quantum electrodynamic sense a destruction of a photon. Right? So I absorbed the photon, I destroyed it basically. So all that I said here is that if I do a more sophisticated calculation for the absorption by writing light matter interaction in completely quantum picture, so atom also quantum, light also quantum, and then do this calculation, I'll get the same, absolutely same result for this. Yeah. The only
Sir,
thing, yeah.
can you recommend some material regarding how it approach, how this comes out?
Yeah. So that
Uh,
I'll tell you some notes basically. Yeah. So all of this will be in Lukin's lecture notes, but yeah, I'll tell you specific pages where it will be found. Okay.
yes,
And
sir.
Lukin's lecture notes are anyway a very good set of notes, which are used in most prominent US universities, etc., for learning about this quantum optics. Okay, any of you who is interested in quantum optics, etc., should definitely read this Lukin's lecture notes. Okay, I think I shared. So in my handout, first handout, there's a link to the Lukin lecture notes to the file which is saved in my Dropbox account actually. And of course, you can also find them online. But just to make it easy, since they are publicly available, so I also publicly shared my whatever is in my folder basically. And surely it will become a book over the years, matlab. Okay, but that is like state of the art for reading, let's say, quantum optics from starting. Okay. So I'll highlight specific pages from that which we should read to understand this calculation. Okay. Okay. Now the only thing in quantum electrodynamics is that we do not think in terms of light intensities. Okay. What we will think of in terms of is n omega. Okay. So I was talking about this creation and annihilation operator, which you may have encountered in your quantum mechanics courses, etc. And I can construct the number operator in terms of this combination of creation and annihilation operators. Okay. So this n omega is nothing but I destroy a photon and then I create it again. So by that means I can count it sort of. Okay. So A dagger A is typically the n omega. Okay. And yeah. So without going into details right now, let's just say that I do this calculation. Light quantum mechanical, matter quantum mechanical, I'll get the same, absolutely same expression for the absorption rate, let's say. Okay. Okay. Now let's go on and do the same calculation for a creation of a photon by adding single photon to a n photon state. Okay. And I do this, etc. Now the vector potential turns out to be identical to what I had here, except that this n omega goes to n omega plus 1. Okay. And this plus 1 is very subtle. It just comes from quantum mechanical effects, which will be called sort of vacuum fluctuations. Okay. So even the ground state of a harmonic oscillator has this half h bar omega. No. So in some sense, the origin comes from there for this. So 2n omega, sorry, 2 times n omega plus 1, let's say. So instead of n omega photon, I have n omega plus 1 photon, etc. And if I do use this vector potential to do a first order QED transition rate calculation, just like we did here, etc., I'll get almost same result as above, except that I'll have again got a n omega plus 1. So the bracket should be inside. Okay. So outside after this omega BA here. So the bracket should have closed here and there should be a bracket outside the whole thing. Okay. So n plus 1, let's say, bracket times h bar. Okay. And otherwise it's exactly same. And I can get the semi-classical transition rate by again doing the same thing by integrating this over a range of frequencies with an envelope for the incident photon, whatever profile I have, and replacing n omega plus 1 by n omega. So if I do this, then I'll get absolutely same transition rate, WAB, which I derived earlier for stimulated emission, basically. Okay. Okay. The highlight here is that the semi-classical approximation neglects one photon in the n plus 1 omega, actually. And this plus 1 is what will give you the spontaneous emission. Okay, with a purely quantum mechanical nature of light effect, basically. You cannot have this in a semi-classical theory. Okay. Okay. And yeah, so now more remarkably, okay. So this n omega plus 1 will do even more remarkable thing, that suppose my n omega was 0. Okay, so in the absence of external field, n photon is 0. Okay, and then this becomes even more severe, and we can have omega ABS. So whatever omega AB I calculated, I'll give it a one extra name. So for, let's say, spontaneous, and I get the same terms. First term 4 pi square by m square. I get this alpha term. I get this h bar by v omega. N is 0, 1 remains, right? MBA mod square times delta omega minus omega BA. Okay. And this one extra photon is what gives you this rate of spontaneous emission. Okay. And you should have a lot of questions for this now, because it's a very remarkable result and very counterintuitive also. So questions?
Sir, for absorption, we will have n plus 1. We will have only n, no? But
Yeah,
for
for
emission, we
absorption,
will
we
have
had
n
only
plus
n.
1.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how does it satisfy the principle of equivalence? Oh, sorry, the last.
Yeah. Yeah. So the
It won't be in the
last term doesn't satisfy principle of detailed balance, actually. Yeah.
detailed balance. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is extra.
So where does it come from? Is how then we can say?
Yeah. So it comes from, so you know quantum mechanics,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Yes. Sir.
So harmonic oscillator ground state, we know,
Yes, sir.
right? So harmonic oscillator ground state have an energy of half h bar omega. Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Where does that come from?
It is due to the quantization conditions of the harmonic oscillator.
Yeah. So yeah. So very nice. Okay. Now let me just take that a step further, actually. Okay. Okay. So just to express it in words, what I can say is the harmonic oscillator has a ground state, let's say, which is vacuum. Right? Vacuum is meaning I have zero number of excited states, right?
Okay.
Or let me put it another way. Okay. So let's say harmonic oscillator, I can think of the excited states as putting number of particles. So I put one particle, it will be in the zeroth state. I put, one particle, it will be in one state. I put two particle, it will be in the n is equal to 2 state, and so on. Right? Can I
Okay.
think like that? Yeah. So harmonic oscillator ground state, I can think in terms of number of particles. Okay. And the ground state is when I have zero particles. No? In the harmonic oscillator, n plus half h bar omega. So the n I can think of as number of particles. I can add 1, 2, 3. It is an integer anyway. So I can think 1, 2, 3. Right. But the half is there also in vacuum.
Yes, sir.
When there are zero particles. Okay. Yeah. So the vacuum state of a harmonic oscillator also has some energy.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah. Very nice. So just like that, absolutely like that, the vacuum state of light also has some energy. And this extra h bar omega energy, which gets released even when there are no photons, etc., is coming from the fluctuations in that ground state energy of vacuum of light, which is there everywhere.
Okay, sir. Yeah, got it.
Yeah, that's a very convoluted way of saying it, but that's the simplest. Matlab.
So we have fluctuations everywhere, and we have some
We
ground state
have
energy
quantum
everywhere. Yeah.
fluctuations even if we are at zero temperature and even if we are, yeah, in the ground state, etc. Yes. Uh, Another way to think is, we can have uncertainties in the energy, right? Even when we are in the ground state, etc. Even when we are in the vacuum, we would naively think that, zero photons, so zero energy, right? But we can have quantum mechanical fluctuations even there. And this is the prominent example of that. So this photon emission, spontaneous photon emission, is coming from there.
Okay, sir.
Okay. So it's a bit subtle. I'll see if I can do a quantum mechanical derivation of this in one of the later classes, etc. But for now, we will proceed with this. Okay. So I wanted to complete this story and photoelectric effect, and then we will go to the density matrix picture, and then later we may come back to the uh, quantum mechanical theory or not, basically. Okay. So these you should at least, I mean, from my course, these are the four basic takeaways. Okay. So absorption, you should understand; stimulated emission, you should understand; spontaneous emission, you should understand; and photoelectric effect, you should understand. Okay. And of course, there will be a lot of symmetry things, etc. Which transitions are allowed in atomic systems, which are not there, etc. All of those we will do, etc. But these four phenomena found the bedrock of all of this course, basically. So three of these: absorption, stimulated emission, spontaneous emission, and photoelectric effect. So four of these phenomena. And then, of course, we will have a lot of details, how these happen in different kind of atoms, etc., etc. Plus a lot of details of spectroscopy, some details of, nonlinear processes, etc. But these form absolute bedrock of this course. Okay. Okay. So, okay. So it seems like we'll not have time for exercise. But anyway, so let's proceed a bit for what I had prepared. So how do we see these transitions in experiments, right? So all of this, we calculated the rate, WAB, etc. So I want to connect it a bit more to, how you will, what you will see in experiments, basically. Okay. Okay. So in experiments, of course, we will set up a detector at a specific location, right? So I have, let's say, my experimental setup here, and I will have a detector here at a, seeing the system, only photons which will come out of the system at some particular theta, phi, etc. Right. So we will observe emission of a photon in a solid angle, and the detector will always have some, some width. I can never have a point particle in practice in a lab, right? So the detector will always have a finite width, let's say. Okay. So I need to worry about some dimensions of that, or I'll need to worry about some solid angle. And in experiment, I will count all the photons that is coming within this angle, etc. So I need to account for all such photons. Okay. So I'll need to start worrying about density of states of photons, let's say, etc. Then just like we count the density of states of electrons in solids, etc., I can do, same assumption that, let's say my experimental setup hole is in the volume V of size L. Then the light momentum will be quantized, because at the end of these boxes I'll have, black wall, etc. So the light wave function has to vanish. So 2 pi by L, nx, ny, and nz, where nx, ny, nz are sort of integers, etc. Right? And because this nx, ny, nz generally are large numbers, and they can vary over integer steps, etc., I have a lot of degeneracy in the number of photonic states that I can have at a frequency omega. Okay. To count those degeneracies, let's count this dnx, dny, dnz, basically some variation in nx, ny, nz, and that I just inverted. So L by 2 pi, dnx I wrote as dkx, dky, dkz, I just multiplied. So L cube becomes the volume, 8 pi cube I have, and I had a dkx, dky, dkz, which I made k square dk d omega. D omega is now the solid angle, right? So the sine theta. So if I had this notation where this was cos theta, the vertical angle, then sine theta times d phi. No, so that's what it is, basically d omega. Okay, And then of course we never think in terms of K. I'll always think in terms of energy of light, etc. So the K of light is connected to the energy of light by this relation omega is equal to Ck. And so K I can replace by omega by C. So I do that exercise and I end up with V by 8 pi cube omega square by C square. And then dk I again replace, I get one more factor of C. So omega square by C cube d omega and d capital omega. Okay. Okay. And now I can calculate really what is this rate of finding a photon in this solid angle d omega, and that is what I will measure per second how many photons I am receiving in my detector basically. So then if I just substitute this W which we just calculated here etc., and use this density of states etc., then this is what I will end up with basically. So I already use the delta function to replace this omega square by omega BA whole square etc., and I'll get this h by 2 pi m square C cube. So all of these are sort of natural constants. M is the only material property. The atomic mass of the atom, the mass of the electron involved, right? Because remember this M is coming from uh, E h square k square by 2m, right? So that M of the electron basically, and the fine structure constant, then WPA, and then so WBA already includes this MBA, so this should not be here, right? So I cannot have an extra MBA, two factors of MBA whole square, at least in first order processes. So WBA already includes that, so cut it out, and d omega. And of course this is for a single polarization of light, right? So immediately question, so where does the polarization of light goes in here in this equation? Which quantity in this last equation is polarization dependent?
Okay. Sorry.
So the MBA square will not be there, but inside this sorry. So this is omega BA, sorry. Okay, so this is not WBA. So this is omega BA. Yeah, okay. So if I write it like that, then this is omega BA and this is MBA whole square. Okay. So which quantity here is polarization dependent? Okay, let's see. So the first term, h by 2 pi m square C cube. Can I have polarization dependent?
No, sir.
It should come in MBA, right?
Right.
MBA it contains epsilon.
MJ.
Yeah. So MBA was epsilon dot del, expectation value between B and A. Remember? So the M has the polarization dependence basically. Okay. M is the only quantity which is polarization dependent. So this is for, so we are doing this calculation for linearly polarized light. So for linearly polarized light, I can have two polarizations. Let's say if the light is traveling along Z, then along X or along Y. So this is for each polarization, etc. And for the other polarization, this MBA will become different. So it will become polarization dependent, let's say lambda. And then I'll have to sum over both the polarizations to just get a total photon count per second coming into the counter roughly. Okay, per unit incident intensity or whatever, etc. Okay, yeah. So that's what I will experimentally basically measure.
Sir, so this measures only those photon which are polarized in one direction. For other, we have to
Yeah.
change the MBA.
For other, we have to change the MBA, do this calculation again, and then sum them up.
Okay.
So, or I can also have detector which are only aligned to measure polarization along one direction. I can also set my detector. So just before the detector, I will set up a polarizer which just allows only one polarization photons to go through. So I can do that, or I can have a normal detector which will detect all photons, etc. Then I'll just have to sum this up over both the polarizations. That's it. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So questions here. So I'll update these notes to include where exactly to read a bit about this quantum theory of light. We will also do it in this course, etc. And yeah, so that was one of your questions. Yeah. Then, yeah. Yeah, more questions. No questions? Okay, so I'll also add a comment about this vacuum fluctuations, etc. If I can think more carefully about, what is the physically, if I have to explain to first year, let's say, yeah, beginning students, etc., how to think about this spontaneous emission physically. More questions?
Sir, hello.
Yeah, yeah.
So in this case, if we consider the quantum fluctuations and all, then the n changes to, in case of creation, the n changes to n plus 1.
Yeah, right.
So what happens exactly to the principle of detailed balance?
No, so this is extra. So this spontaneous emission will always be there. Okay. This, if you like, violates principle of detailed balance. This is extra. Even in Einstein's theory, this we already know that if you just leave atoms, you will start see some flashes, basically, once in a while. So this you can actually do experiment in Sager's lab. Okay. So he has an inside room which is completely black. So almost no photons will be there, etc. No laser is turned on. He'll just have a box of atoms. Yeah, which is a remarkable feat of engineering to get it right. So you need to make a very high vacuum, etc., very strong enclosure, etc., etc. And he will have this collection of atoms, whatever rubidium atoms or something, etc. And if you just observe them long enough, you will keep seeing these flashes of light. I think. Okay. So the spontaneous emission will keep happening, and this is in addition to the detailed balance. Yeah.
So the atom will keep on losing energy now, means it will absorb less and
Yeah. Okay. So okay. So yeah. So ideally you are right. Okay. But what happens is, in principle, is the reverse process also happens. Okay. So the atom will also absorb a photon from vacuum fluctuations.
okay. So
Quantum
that will
mechanics, both processes are equally probable. I mean, no.
okay, sure.
And that is
Yes.
why the vacuum is always in ground state. I mean, energy. Okay. Otherwise, all hell will break loose, right? We will all go. I mean, the universe should ideally have gone towards zero temperature. Otherwise, right? By emitting all light.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
So the reverse process is always there.
Sir, can you explain it once more? I just did not follow. Like,
Which part? You ask a more precise question.
Sir, the last question that if always means the system is left to equilibrium, it will always like spontaneous emission will happen, but that is
Yeah.
not like a energy conserving process.
Precisely, yeah. So just like we think of spontaneous emission, there should also be an analogous procedure, which is spontaneous absorption,
Yeah.
right? So that process will ensure that the energy doesn't get to zero. Yeah. So sometimes I will absorb spontaneously, right? Taking one photon out of the vacuum, and sometimes I will give vacuum one photon, emit one photon.
Okay, so the spontaneous absorption part can't it be shown in the calculations, or like we are only seeing the
Yeah.
stimulated?
Yeah. So that's a very good point, actually. Yeah. So somehow, yeah. So this is not there in the calculation. Okay. So yeah. So somehow this is not there in the calculation. Whatever I showed till now. Okay. So let me think a bit more about it. Okay.
Okay, so
So maybe it manifests as a higher order process also, etc., or something else is also happening. I do not know. Okay. But remember, see, only we did is the first order perturbation theory, right?
yes.
So all our inferences are based on a very limited calculation. Okay.
All right.
Yeah. But that's a way of thinking, let's say, which should help, matlab. Yeah. But not very accurate mathematically, as you point out. I agree.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. Yeah, because in my rate of absorption, I do not have a +1, no? Mathematically, yeah. So you're right. Okay, let me think more about it.
sir.
I'll get back. Yeah,
Hello, sir.
yeah.
Sir, we
Human
get
side.
energy from vacuum,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
this is violation of energy. I think conservation of energy.
Yeah. Sure, sure. So what is the problem?
That's a problem.
Quantum
We
mechanics
always
is
know that.
quantum mechanics is a violation of energy conservation principle, right? Do you know there's an uncertainty relationship between energy and time?
Yeah, I've seen
So delta E delta T product has to be greater than equal to h by 2 pi, no?
it. Yeah.
So uncertainty principle allows violation of energy over short periods of time.
But in the long run, it all averages out to
Yeah.
the
In the long run,
conservation.
yeah. So the uncertainty goes both sides. That is correct. Yeah. So in the long run, we cannot keep losing energy. That's precisely what I said. But energy conservation is not strict at each moment, deterministic universe. So energy conservation, the way we think of, is a deterministic universe principle, but quantum mechanics is uh, indeterministic. So of course, yeah, in quantum mechanics, you will see examples where a priori it look like you are violating energy conservation. Of course, if you take a time average over large time scale, etc., then everything is in order. But this is a very nice question, actually. Yeah. More questions. Okay. So if you do not have questions, then I have some questions. So let me stop sharing this. Okay. So I'll share my previous lecture notes. I want you to do these calculations explicitly. Okay. So the two calculations which were mentioned. In fact, I thought you will have questions for me today. No. So I again shared the same. Sorry. So I wanted to share the last lecture notes. Yeah. Oh, where did I go? Yeah. So in the last lecture, I had two of these questions, right? Okay, so let me make them slightly more complicated, since probably just writing doesn't get you excited. Yeah. So how do I calculate this? So you calculate this probability of going from B to A. So this probability of going from A to B. Sorry, my mistake. So A to B, etc. So how do I calculate this explicitly, starting from this CKT that we had basically, right? And remember that this complex conjugate is wrong, no? Because we'll get a plus sign here, etc. Right? Okay, so I should correct this in the updated notes, basically. Okay. So how do I calculate this explicitly? Okay, that is number one question. Now, just to give you slightly more, make it slightly more complicated. Suppose I take this, right? The probability will always be CB1T mod square, right? So I have a sum of two terms. If I take a mod square, I'll start getting a sum of four terms, right? A plus B into C plus D. If I do the complex conjugate of this being C plus D, then I'll start getting AC, AD, BC, and BD. So I'll have four terms basically, right? Of course, two of these terms will turn out to be this, no? One of the terms will turn out to be this. You need to explicitly show that. Other term will come out to be the stimulated emission. You can show that. You should show that. Okay. Question within question. What about the other two terms? Where did I eat them? You should have asked me this question. I was anticipating. Or you are not paying attention. Or you are letting me off easy. Either way, I do not appreciate. Okay. So it's an important question, right? What happened to the other terms? I cannot just eat them up. So why did I neglect them? Okay. Do this calculation and show. Okay. Or I'll be forced to ask in the quiz. Okay, so that was one, and this is relatively simple. So you can show that this equation basically gives you pi t. So these are basically the assignment problems for this week, let's say. And from next week, I'll give separate assignment problems, which we will discuss on Thursday. So let's maintain that. If you do not do problem, then you will all fail in my course. Actually, I am telling you, because I will give you small problems only, which are easy for me to grade and which are easy for you to do in a sense of exam time, finite time exam questions. But definite problems I will give you, which will take 2-3 pages to solve at the max, basically. Yeah, because I want a solution in at max half an hour or something like that. Okay. So these two problems you solve. Next time again, I will ask this question: what happened to the other two terms from here? And yeah, you tell me the answer. Okay. And you look at all the old notes and point out the problems, right? What am I missing? Okay. Okay. And I will share some notes on laser and measure historical development. If some of you are interested, read it. That's it, basically. So none of you worried
So
about
in
what
place
happened?
of,
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah,
Sumanta.
in place of complex conjugate dash, what did you tell for the
So,
correction?
okay. So the
Yeah.
CB is written in the previous lecture note also. So in lecture note 2 also it is there, the full expression. No. So the complex conjugate is e to the power minus I delta omega. Right. And then here it will become 0 to t dt prime e to the power minus I omega BA, but I'll get a plus omega. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Plus
And MBA will be there. MBA will also change, no, for complex conjugate or no?
Uh, yeah, probably. So I don't remember, but yeah. Yeah, you can look at the previous lecture notes. No. So MBA will not change actually. So if you look carefully, so all of this dependent come from the omega dependence of A basically, right?
Okay, okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
MBA
The
will
MBA
be
will
there.
not change actually. Okay. Yeah. Because the A had both basically, right? E to the power I omega t and e to the power minus I omega t. So the A will give you one term, and in the complex conjugate, only the omega changes sign. The other term doesn't change sign. That was the issue basically. Okay. It is very close to complex conjugate, but the complex conjugate of A. Okay. Yeah. So I'll correct these notes in the and update them again in the Mookit. But this is a real question, no? You should worry, Malab. Yeah. If I take a mod square of this, I'll get 4 terms. Where did the other 2 terms? Sir, kahan kha gaye? Cheating kar liya, sir. If I were you, I would be worried. If I was paying attention, really worried. Okay, so more questions, let's say. So that was question from me. Questions from you. Okay, so if there are no other questions, then let's stop this lecture. Right. So yeah. So let me stop recording first and then